If we turn the page over to the Renaissance moving north, you will notice that during this time there was also fantastico inventions at the time, and one of them was movable type. Johannes Gutenberg on page 434. He was from Germany, and on page 434, Johannes Gutenberg came up with this movable type, and ultimately this became what we think of as characters or letters on a keyboard, on an old school typewriter like your parent, well, maybe your parents or your grandparents used back in the day. And on page 434, it shows you some of those movable type kinds of things. And you can see that the movable type or individual letters and marks, it could be moved so that they could actually create words and then print these words onto paper, which takes us to page 435, the printing press. Johannes Gutenberg from Germany. He was on page 435. He's also spoken about because if you see the printing press there on page 435, it's this big heavy wooden thing where he would set up the type, or he'd set up the letters and make words and then press this stuff down onto the paper using ink. And of course from that you would actually have an old school word typewriter kind of machine where the books and pamphlets and newspapers could finally be printed. This change, this invention is probably one of the greatest inventions that gave way for the Renaissance being spread throughout Europe. Before this time, of course, they didn't have internet, no telephone, no cell phones, no satellite, so what they had to do ultimately is by word of mouth. Johannes Gutenberg from Germany, he creates this printing press and this movable type, and now people can stamp this stuff, they can get the news, and this news can be distributed throughout Europe. Of course, you have to remember that by the time it got to wherever it was going, the news was old news. Old, get it? Old news. Anyway, on page 435, you can see that there is a whole bunch of blah, blah, blah information, and it talks about a couple of different things. As these printers were printing information, the concept of Christianity, religious idea, and humanism began to blend into Christian humanism, which is found on page 435, second paragraph. Okay? And as that continued to move, there was a guy named by the name of Erasmus. Now, Erasmus was a Roman Catholic priest, and he did some writing, and he was a scholar of Latin and of Greek. And as your book points out, about halfway down the page there, he talks about certain church practices. He uses this Johannes Gutenberg from Germany. He uses his particular invention, and he has these pamphlets printed up, and he has them distributed. And on page 435, it shows the idea that he creates something called the utopia. Utopia. Make sure you know that. Utopia. All right? And again, that can be found in section 2. And the utopia is where we get the vocabulary word utopian form or utopian world, in which an ideal, perfect world where everybody lives together in harmony, peace, love, and understanding. Feel better? Me neither. All right. So we turn to page 436, and we have literature of the Northern Renaissance, and it talks about a lot of people. Now, when you go through this and study, you have to make sure you touch on these people. So make a little chart. So you have Johannes Gutenberg from Germany, printing press. Okay, so you can kind of match them up. You have Erasmus, the Prince of Follies, and you have Utopia. Okay, so you can match them up. You have Michelangelo, this is Teen Chapel, you can match them up. Leonardo da Vinci, you have Mona Lisa, you have Donatello, and Donatello is the statue of David, the sculptor. So you have to understand that as you go through and study these, you have to actually create vocabulary words, study guides, matching, and either use Quizlet or use some type of cards, 3x5 cards or flashcards or index cards or something, so that you can get to know these people. We're going to fly through these people. This is the time on page 436 where you have François, I'm not really French, but François Rabelais of France. And it talks a little bit about him. It talks a little bit about a guy by the name of William Shakespeare, right? And he wrote, of course, Romeo and Juliet, which is very famous. William Shakespeare is also mentioned on page 436. He's England's best-known writer and poet. He had all kinds of plays. He had all kinds of comedies and tragedies, and he was very, very good at having the skills to communicate life stories and love, and again, humanistic ideas, love, beauty, nature, the struggle between relationships, and ultimately what life was like during that particular time in the Renaissance, okay? On page 437, we have Art of the Northern Renaissance, which of course has changed. I gotta read. There we go. Changes, a little bit. And again, we have some more people. It's the best way to do it, folks. It's the best way to do it. The best way to do it is to make a person and then what they did or what they wrote. Write down a person, what they did or what they wrote. Write down a person, what they did or what they wrote. Okay? It really comes down to those of you that are going to spend the time going through the vocabulary and do the person and what they did or wrote. All right? And on page 437, we have a few of the others. Jean Van Eyck, who lived in the early 1400s, was a master of realistic portraits. And if you look on page 437, you will see that he would oftentimes paint pictures of realistic situations, whether it was a husband or wife or children or interacting with other children or whatever happened to be in a natural environment. So oftentimes it wasn't necessarily, well, let me say this. Sometimes it was staged, but it was believable. So if a husband and wife were talking, it could be in a house, in a courtyard or something like that. Children playing out, perhaps in a field, or people fishing in a river, some type of real, oh, mama, hold on just a second. Some type of realistic situation where people, I gotta fix this fire here. I want to catch on fire. Stop, drop, and roll. All right. Oh, shoot, lost my place. Falling apart. So Jean Van Eyck on page 437, and he created these realistic portraits. Can you guys? All right, we good? All right, and there's a few other people there that you want. Again, person, what they did, what they painted. Person, what they did, what they. Jean Van Eyck, realistic portraits. Michelangelo, Sistine Chapel. You guys with me? You're getting the idea, right? Erasmus. We have what? Come on, Utopia. Erasmus, Utopia. We have Michelangelo, the Sistine Chapel. You have Donatello. Donatello, go ahead. Come on. Come on, I know you can do it. Good. The sculpture. Good. Very good. All right. William Shakespeare. What country? England. Good. All right. So we turn to section 3. It comes before 4 and after 2, unless you're counting backwards, between not.